Hello everyone, it's Dr. Paul Rose back again with another presentation on how to do MSc level science. And in this presentation, we're going to be looking at science communication, specifically how to do an engaging and interesting presentation of your scientific research. So let's start by thinking about some good pointers for scientific research presentations. This presentation is going to cover what makes a good slide and why, what to try and avoid when you're putting together a presentation, what key information should you put on your PowerPoint slides, what do you really need to convey to your audience, and then I've also provided some templates, some instructions if you like, for the introduction, methods, results and discussion slides that you might have to do for your own presentation on your own scientific research. So the aim of this talk is to give you an idea of the most important, the most fundamental aspects of delivering science and delivering the outputs of research so that your audience gets the most out of the presentation that you're giving. Let's start off with what makes for a good title slide. Provide images that attract attention and are relevant to the title of your research. Make sure your title is big and bold, front and center in your title slide. Tell everybody who you are, tell everybody where you're from, and perhaps, if permissions allow, provide your email address for future correspondence. Remember, if you've done work for an institution or because you belong to an institution who has supported your research, please provide the institution's logo. And remember to provide the logo of other institutions from collaborators or co-authors or anybody else that has been actively involved in the research that you are presenting. Ultimately, a title slide should have a few keywords, some nice images, and your contact information and details so people know exactly what you're talking about and who you are. Your presentation should have impact on your audience. Your audience should go away having learned something new and be engaged or excited by the research that you're talking about. So a nice clear title that explains the content of your presentation is key. Try to be concise and not too wordy. Don't try to be clever or make a joke in your title if it means people are not going to be able to understand it well. And also remember that jokes don't always translate very well across different cultures and languages. Provide pictures that are visually attractive, engaging, but relevant to your talk, the species that you might have studied for the example, or the concept that you're covering, for example. Those are the best types of images to use. You should also use key phrases and terminology within your presentation, but these should always be explained. The reader should know exactly what they mean, but try not to give really long dictionary definitions. Clarity and conciseness is best. So here is an example of thinking about what you could say and how you could say it. On the left-hand side, I've got a standard list that somebody might put on their aims or objectives or introduction slide to their presentation. They've just simply listed introduction, methods, results, discussion, conclusion, and references. This reads like a contents page. It's not very exciting. It's simply a list of the things that you will cover. Why does the reader or the audience actually need that slide? If you're not going to expand on, I'm going to talk about this, then I'm going to talk about that, then I'm going to talk about the other. If you're simply just going to list introduction, methods, results, and discussion, where's the added value of that slide? So perhaps if your presentation was about lemur behavior, these ring-tailed lemurs on this slide here, perhaps you were looking at enrichment, so giving the animal something in its environment that would stimulate its behaviors, and what you had given it were bubbles from a bubble dispensing machine. Perhaps your introductory slide could be, do lemurs like bubbles? That is your question that you've set out to investigate. You could then think about, how do we measure whether or not lemurs like bubbles? We then can present our results and say whether or not we've actually found that lemurs do enjoy having bubbles in their enclosure. And then we can talk about the wider application. So what can be said about these research findings? So be engaging to your audience. Lead your audience through the different stages of your project rather than simply listing introduction is followed by methods is followed by results, and so on and so forth. Please, please, please think about the amount of text, the amount of words that you use on your slides. This is a golden rule for presenting. If you are simply just reading out what you have written on your slides, what is your relevance to the presentation? What is your added value? Here you can see in this example, if you write a lot of words, it's very distracting for the reader. It's very distracting for the audience because they're focusing on what they're reading. They're not focusing on what you are explaining. Volumes of text that are simply being read out is very disengaging and very uninteresting for the audience. Try to use bullet points, try to use flowcharts, diagrams, tables or figures. Think about the use of smart art in PowerPoint to present information in an interesting and engaging manner. As a general rule, if you find your size of your font going below size 24, the chances are you've written too much. Between size 24 and size 30 is best for the general text on the slide itself. Titles, of course, can be bigger to grab attention. Even if you're presenting to a big room, don't try to present lots and lots and lots of text in the hope that people in the audience will read along. Your presence as the person being engaging and presenting is more valuable than masses of text and masses of words that people have to follow along in their own time. You are the key to being engaging and accessible to the information on the slides. Even for complicated terminology, even for technical details, don't use a lot of words. Use enough words to spell out key things that are important, but don't write massive paragraphs that over-explain and overcomplicate. Again, you are the key to accessibility. So long as you know what the terminology means and you can explain it, you will bring along your audience with you. If you are unsure about a piece of information that's really crucial to your message, make sure you put that definition and the concept on your slide. Spell out any scientific jargon so people exactly know what you're talking about. So in this example, here is a picture of a toucan, a bird kept in captivity that often suffers from an illness called iron storage disease. The medical or veterinary term for iron storage disease is hemochromatosis. That's very technical. So I have given the technical term in bold, I've given a brief description of the term, and then I've provided the colloquial or common name for the veterinary term. So I can then be accessible and refer back to iron storage disease, but my audience will know that I actually mean hemochromatosis. So when you're using technical language, when you're explaining scientific concepts, don't always rely on bullet points. You don't need bulleted paragraphs or bulleted sentences that take up every part of your PowerPoint slide. Think about colour, think about shape and size, and think about the layout of the text that you are using. Make sure that it has a logical flow, and think about the imagination in the style that you have used as well. It's really, really important that you use figures and tables and diagrams in your work, because remember, a picture can tell 1,000 words. If you present something in an engaging manner that leads the reader through it, you're more likely to keep the attention of your audience. Pictures that you can then explain give focus to the picture and the diagram and the concept, but also give focus to you as the presenter. You'll have more focus with less text and more illustration and your explanation than simply copying out paragraphs of text into your slides. Please remember to keep your slides as clean and simple as possible. One large picture, image or diagram that is well explained is much better than a load of graphs all crammed in together. Here is an example of a results slide that I've mocked up. I've got one picture, one graph. I can explain that graph thoroughly. I can say why it's important. I can talk about the key finding on the graph, and the reader is not distracted by clutter or superfluous detail around it. Simplicity is best because it allows you to talk around it and be confident in your explanation of your research. Here's an example of what not to do. Things are crammed in, it's very messy, it's hard to follow, there's no logical flow. I've presented loads of results. I've presented even more results both graphically and in text. I've stuck a picture in that doesn't really link to my results. It's very crammed in and it's distracting. The reader doesn't know which part to focus on, and I don't have a flow from slide to slide or concept to concept. Clean, concise, specific is best. Focus on what you are going to talk about, key results, key outputs that directly link to your aims, objectives, and the hypotheses of your study. Don't try to include lots of detail because you feel you've got limited time and you've got to cram lots of stuff in. The reason why you give your email address or your contact details, or why there's time for questions at the end, is to allow your audience to approach you if they wish to know more. Your presentation should distill down the most important aspects of your research. It should not try to tell the reader or the audience everything about what you've done. Remember that timing is crucial. Please practice, no matter how excruciating that might be. Practice with friends and family. Practice on yourself by recording into your computer. Nobody likes listening to the sound of their own voice, but the more you practice, the better you will get at timing. Try to aim for a slide a minute. If that's a 10-minute talk, that's 10 slides. So think about how much you're logistically possible at getting through. Will you really be able to cover 30 or 45 slides if you only have 10 minutes? You'll end up rushing, you'll get flustered, and you might lose the thread of your audience. If you only have a 15-minute slot, don't write a 20-minute talk. If you know you've gone over, be brutal. Really edit down your work. Ask for the help of others to see what they think is most important for you to include and to explain. And please stick to the requirements of the schedule. It is professional to know your timing and to know how long you are speaking for. If you run over, it's off-putting for the next speaker. They might then feel rushed and they might then foreshorten their own presentation. It can also cause major problems for the person chairing the session, and it can ultimately really distract from your message. It's professional and good manners to practice your talk and stick to the timing that you have been allocated. Videos are great so long as you're confident that they will work. They can explain key concepts, they can add interest, they can expand upon the points that you are trying to describe, particularly if it's something behavioural or technical, whereby actually watching what happens is really useful to how the audience can grasp your story. However, technical issues are probably the things that cause the greatest panic amongst presenters. Check that your videos will work. Practice with your videos beforehand. Save your final presentation onto a memory stick or external hard drive and take it with you to your conference or symposium. Even if you've had to submit your slides in advance, having that backup copy in your pocket will give you a get-out clause in case things go wrong. Directly embed your video into your PowerPoint slides like I've done here. That way, the video will be part of the slideshow. You can click on the playback options and choose the video to play automatically, and it can be looped until you stop it. That takes the stress out of remembering to play videos, and it also prevents the video from stopping, and then maybe you haven't actually covered the point as to why the video is there. In PowerPoint, go to Insert, choose Video, and then Video from My PC, and then you can move it around and embed it into your slide. A bit of a tip for you: if a conference organizer wants to copy your slides onto a main computer that's playing all presentations, always ask that you can check your presentation and make sure your videos have copied as well. If you are worried, then I suggest that you ask the conference organizers if you can play your presentation from a memory stick. You might be able to give the memory stick in before your presentation, and therefore it doesn't screw up their schedule, but it puts your mind at rest because you know that PowerPoint is linking to the video on the memory stick. It knows where the video is, and therefore everything should play properly. But again, just to repeat myself, use videos, they're brilliant, but please check beforehand that they're actually going to work. Checking on a different computer is the best way of making sure that your videos will definitely play when it comes to presenting from a computer that is not the one that you've written the slides on. Thinking about reference material, that's really important for us as scientists. We must show evidence where things have come from. Do outside reading as you go. It's best to write your slides and use examples. Don't write your slides and then fit in references, because the chances are you will forget where key points have come from. And you might lose the audience's attention. You might be falling foul of plagiarism if you don't cite consistently. It's also best to have citations as the same size as your regular text. Personally, I don't know why people put citations in small font within their text on their presentation, because the citation allows the audience to see where that information has come from. They can jot down the reference and then find the reference themselves. Thinking about reference lists at the end of presentations, I often see people skip over the reference list at the end, so nobody gets a chance to read it anyway. Putting the full reference at the bottom of your slide works, because if you've referred to it in the text, the audience can see where it's come from. So perhaps you can say that reference details can be provided, have a printed out or emailed version of your reference list, so that if people in the audience want them, they can come up to you, engage with you about your talk, and you can provide the reference list. Or perhaps you can have an acknowledgements and a thank you slide at the end with a nice picture on one side and references and acknowledgement on the other. That way, when you're answering questions and talking to the audience, your references will remain up there. Either way, be creative with your referencing so that if people want to see what references you've used, they will have the opportunity. But it's best to avoid a reference list at the end that you're simply going to skip over. When you're thinking about how to end your talk, try to have an attractive image of the subject of your research, of an image of the concept that you've covered, something that brings your talk together. A conclusion states what you found and why it's important to the wider world. You then acknowledge the people that helped you with the research, your co-authors, collaborators, the institution that you went to collect data. Say thank you to the audience and then invite questions. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed this presentation and I'm happy to take any questions. However, if you have run over, acknowledge the fact that you've run over. I believe I'm out of time, but I'm happy to take questions in the coffee break or over lunch. That way you've acknowledged to the chair that they've probably got to move on with the next presentation, and it makes you look more professional. Try to be creative with your end slide so the audience knows it's the end of the talk and you've wrapped up everything that you've wanted to say and you've thanked everybody that you've wished to thank. So in summary, please keep the layout of your presentation simple, clean and crisp. Avoid clutter, avoid unnecessary images, avoid photographs that don't really link to what you're talking about, don't give too much text, and don't have small text on a background picture that nobody can read. Avoid lots of detail that will cause the audience to have to read rather than listen to you. You are the gateway to the information on the slides. You should be front and center, and the PowerPoint should be your support act. Always define technical terms, always define complex terminology. It will help you out, you will remember what you're going to say, and it will make your research more accessible to your audience. Always provide introduction to your content, present your key points and ideas, and then give a final summary of what your content was. Tell the reader what you're going to tell them, then tell them what they've been told. That's the best way to lead somebody through a presentation. If you'd like any extra help on any of this, if you are a research student, that's what your supervisor is for. Ask for academic support. Perhaps ask to practice on your supervisor if this is a conference presentation of your work that you're doing at the end of your program. There are some brilliant examples of help that you can find on the internet. Google will be your friend. This website here, skillsyouneed.com/present/presentation tips, has a brilliant array of different pieces of information on how to put together an engaging and interesting PowerPoint show. And practice, 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 even though it might be difficult and excruciating and you want the ground to swallow you, the more practice you do, the better you will get at timing, at slide design, and at delivering information in a concise and clear manner. As a general rule for a presentation, take the timing that you've been allocated, give 15% to introductions, give 15% to conclusions, and think about the main body of the work being about 70% of your talk. So introduce yourself and your topic, then explain what you're going to say in a clear and logical manner. Use lots of information that is illustrated in graphics, charts, and avoid lots of text. Only focus on essentials. Try to be interactive. Try to look at photos or videos or key points and use relevant animation. Bring things onto your slides. Make things disappear to add impact. Summarize what you've said. Invite questions and ask for any feedback as you go. Receive feedback from your audience based on your questions, because if this is a presentation that's part of ongoing research, that will be really valuable to you. So what I'd like to end on in this talk are just some example slide templates that I have put together that will give you some pointers in clear, crisp and simplistic information for a scientific introduction slide, a scientific method slide, a scientific results slide, and a scientific discussion. Think about having a couple of slides for the introduction, including aims. Think about 2 or 3 slides for methods. These should cover your study system, what you measured and recorded, and then everyone's favourite, how you analysed your data. Never shy away from stats in a scientific presentation. Think about the results, going over a couple of slides that integrate descriptive and inferential material. Descriptive stats, graphs and charts, inferential material, statistical output. And then have a discussion section that evaluates and explains your results, that puts your results in the wider context of the wider reading, and then something that explains and describes your overall conclusions, what you found out and why it's important. References are essential to your introduction, your methods, and your discussion. Remember to use citations thoroughly and fluently from the peer-reviewed, unbiased, objective literature as you go through your talk. So first up, here's an example introduction slide that could be for a research project on hornbills. This rather charming bird. Here is a photograph of a rhinoceros hornbill. This was my chosen study system. And here is a map of its range so the audience can see where it comes from. I would introduce my question, my research aims and objectives, why I'm studying hornbills. I'd give a brief explanation of relevant natural history that supports my research question. I'd provide references that allow the reader to know more if they so wished. And I'd give some nice images that I can talk around. These are the sex differences between males and females, for example. I could point them out. These are the range states that it comes from and the habitat that we find it in, which adds engagement and further interest to the pieces of text that are essential to introducing my study system and the questions that I'm answering. So my methods section, I would explain my data collection, where I did it, how I did it, and why I chose those approaches. I would describe my study population in detail, and I would talk about different aspects of my methods depending on who was the audience. So for a scientific audience, I might describe my variables, independent, dependent, and extraneous. I might explain the materials I used for data collection, including any technology that was essential, perhaps camera traps, something like that I was recording behaviour with. And I would also record and explain data analysis. For non-scientific presentations, perhaps I was talking to practitioners, for example. Perhaps I was explaining my scientific outputs to people that actually looked after this animal. I described what I observed and how I observed it. I'd describe what I did, and then I would talk about how I would use that information to actually change husbandry or practice. Please remember that this would be over a number of slides. I've condensed it into here, but don't follow this exactly. Spread out the data collection methods on one slide, the materials on another slide, the data analysis on a further slide. Don't cram it all together. I've just used this as an example of the key bits of information that I would include. And for methods, pictures, diagrams, flowcharts work so much better than text. Here you can see the study population of hornbills, much easier to explain that with a photograph. And here you can see some enrichment with hornbills. Again, much easier to explain that if I was testing the effects of enrichment, much easier to describe that with a photograph than with lots and lots of words. So then we move on to results. Graphs and tables for descriptives are excellent. The picture that they show is more interesting than simply describing with text averages, measures of spread, so on and so forth. Talk around your illustrative examples. Include statistical outputs with your graphs. Don't have slides full of graphs and then slides full of statistical outputs. Marry them up together. Try not to detract the reader, the audience, with lots of superfluous detail that is not essential. Don't hide your worries or anxieties about stats with nice photos. Your scientific audience will want to know about your results because your results are potentially the most novel and interesting part of the research. Include photos if they're interesting and relevant. Here is a graph of male and female differences. I have included photos of the male and female animals so that the reader can follow through my story. But don't simply include nice images that have no bearing on what you are explaining. If you have multiple aims, maybe one aim was on behaviour, have one slide on behaviour patterns. If your another aim was on nutrition, have another slide on your nutritional outputs. And if a further slide was on enclosure usage, for example, have your next result slides on how the animals use their space. Have a number of result slides based on what data you're presenting and describing. And then finally, an example discussion slide. Start off the discussion with what you found out, then give an evaluation of your findings alongside of other research, compare and contrast what you have found, take the most important results and explain them accordingly. Give further extensions of the research, explain limitations as further extensions, acknowledge challenges with your project, challenges with your method, but say what you would do again so that the reader can see how the limitation can be turned into an opportunity. And remember to tell the audience what was good about your research. Don't just focus on limitations. Focus on what you did, why you did it, and how it added to the body of literature. Remember, science is cumulative. We're always building on what we have done in the past to take us into the future. Again, you would spread your discussion out across numerous slides. Maybe have a discussion slide that was the key summary and what you found, a discussion of limitations and research extensions, and then a final discussion slide that concluded what you have found out and why it's important. I hope this presentation has given you some useful ideas on how to construct a scientific presentation in PowerPoint, how you can engage with your audience, how to put together informative, interesting and accessible content, and also what to avoid. Avoid lots of text, avoid writing over diagrams, and make sure that you are the main focus of the presentation and your slides are the support act. Don't have your slides as the main focus and you as a support act. You should be the one taking the audience through your slides. Thank you very much and good luck with your research.